Have you ever thought about the fact that the most important period of your life is probably one you have zero memory of? Well, today we're diving into exactly that. We're talking about the first 1,000 days, from pregnancy all the way through infancy, and how this incredible window of time basically drafts the blueprint for the rest of our lives. I mean, just think about that question for a second. It's pretty wild, right? This is the period where our life story really kicks off, long before we can even form a conscious memory. And the science behind how it all works, well, it's absolutely fascinating. So the core idea we really need to get our heads around is this thing called fetal programming. The best way to think about it is like this. Imagine you get a brand new computer. Before you can do anything with it, no apps, no software, you have to install its core operating system. Well, the prenatal environment? That's the operating system. It sets the fundamental rules for how our bodies and our brains are going to run for the rest of our lives. Okay, so how does this biological programming actually work? It really all starts with this incredibly complex chemical conversation happening between a mother and her developing child. It's a dialogue that starts shaping us from our very first cells. A mother's body is constantly sending these little hormonal signals to the fetus. And one of the most important messengers in this whole conversation is cortisol. Now, a lot of us hear cortisol and immediately think stress hormone, right? But when it comes to pregnancy, its job is way, way more complicated than just that. What's wild is that cortisol kind of has two completely different faces. Sure, if you have prolonged, really extreme exposure, it can be harmful, but it also plays this vital role as a protective programmer. Especially late in pregnancy, it's absolutely essential for maturing crucial organs and getting the brain ready for its big debut in the outside world. It really is all about the timing and the dose. And honestly, the research here is just stunning. That natural spike in a mother's cortisol during the third trimester, it's linked to some seriously amazing long-term benefits for the child. We're talking about a thicker cortex in the brain's frontal regions, better cognitive performance overall, and even higher vocabulary scores years later. It's a perfect example of nature's brilliant design at work. But, okay, it's not just about the hormonal soup in the womb. Two of the most powerful physical predictors for a person's future health are locked in at the moment of birth. Exactly how long a baby developed, which is their gestational age, and of course, their birth weight. And the impact here, it can be staggering. A major analysis found that babies born either very preterm or with a very low birth weight have over 10 times the odds of developing autism spectrum disorder. I mean, from a public health standpoint, that is a massive, massive difference, tied directly to the conditions at birth. And it doesn't stop there. The risk for ADHD is also dramatically higher, more than 5 times the odds for that very same group. These are profound, lifelong neurodevelopmental risks that can really change the entire course of a person's life. And you see the same pattern across a whole range of psychiatric conditions, with nearly double the odds of an anxiety disorder later on. This data just hammers home how critical a healthy birth weight and a full-term pregnancy are for building a resilient foundation for a kid's future. And here's the thing, it's not just about the extreme cases. The research shows that across the entire spectrum, a higher birth weight is generally protective. It's linked to a better overall quality of life for a child years down the road. It really seems that when it comes to getting a healthy start, every single gram matters. But of course, none of this biological stuff happens in a bubble, right? So how does it all actually play out in the messy, complicated real world? To see that, let's take a look at two very different places, Zambia and New Zealand, and see how biology meets reality. So in rural Zambia, you have new mothers who are often trying to navigate this world where ancient, powerful community traditions are bumping up against the demands of modern medicine. And then halfway across the world, in New Zealand, you have young Maori mothers trying to find their way through a really complex, often fragmented healthcare system. Both situations create their own very unique sets of challenges. And this is a perfect illustration of how deeply culture is woven into newborn care. In parts of Zambia, there are these very specific protective rituals for everything, from using fire to make a baby strong to applying traditional herbs and powders to the umbilical cord. And these aren't just quaint little customs. They are absolutely central to how a community understands health and safety. And this creates a situation that researchers have a name for: maternal dualism. Basically, mothers are caught between two powerful worlds. They feel this deep pull of their culture, their community, their traditions. But at the same time, they're facing intense pressure, sometimes even getting fined by community leaders if they don't deliver their babies in a health facility. It's a really tough and often incredibly stressful balancing act.
All right, now let's jump over to New Zealand. There's this persistent and frankly damaging stereotype that young pregnant Maori women often wait too long to get maternity care. But is that actually true? Well, the answer might surprise you. The research gives us a loud and clear answer. No, it's not true. In reality, these young women are often really proactive. They confirm their pregnancies early with a doctor. The problem isn't them. The problem is that the very system they turn to for help often ends up failing them. So let's just walk through this journey. A young woman does everything right, sees a doctor early on. But then, instead of getting a direct connection to care, she's often just handed a list of names and told, "Good luck, find a midwife yourself." So then she's left struggling, all on her own, to navigate this complex system. And the result? Totally unnecessary and avoidable delays in getting the critical care she needs. So whether we're talking about cultural tension in Zambia or a broken system in New Zealand, these early experiences don't just disappear. They create what you could call a lifelong echo, shaping a person's health and their well-being for decades. And this is really where it all comes together. Think of it like this. The biological foundation that's set at birth, like birth weight and gestational age, that's the clay. But the social, the cultural, and the healthcare environment that a child is born into, that's the sculptor. Together, those two forces work to shape a person's entire life path. But, and this is so important, here's the crucial point of hope. As the research makes very clear, while these factors create risk, they absolutely do not seal a person's fate. Outcomes are not deterministic, and that means that with the right support, with the right help, we can actually change the trajectory of a child's life for the better. So, after this deep dive into our earliest days, what are the big takeaways? What should we all remember about this really critical window of life? Well, first, that this early period of life is unbelievably foundational. Second, our biology, things like birth weight, sets an initial baseline of either risk or resilience. Third, that the social and cultural world we're born into is an incredibly powerful force. And finally, our healthcare systems play a huge role. They can either build a bridge to a healthy start, or they can put up a wall. And all of this really leaves us with one last vital question. Knowing just how critical this period is, and understanding this deep dance between our biology and our environment, what can we all do in our own communities to better support every single new beginning?